What if you're working longer than you need to? Now, before anybody starts typing in the comments, I am not telling anybody to quit their job tomorrow. And this isn't going to be one of those videos about withdrawal rates, retirement calculators, or the 4% rule. There are plenty of channels that do a great job covering that stuff. I'm talking about something different. I'm talking about the emotional side of retirement because a cancer diagnosis forced me to ask a question at 48, and a layoff forced me to answer that question at 51. And by the end of this video, I want you to answer that same question for yourself because the biggest retirement mistake may not be retiring too early, it may be working too long. Because I've met people who retired and wish they had worked longer. But I've also met people who worked longer and wish they had retired sooner. And if I'm being honest, I hear the second group a lot more often. People saying things like, I kept saying 1 more year. I missed time with my grandkids. I didn't realize how tired I was. I didn't need to keep working. And every time I hear those stories, I come back to the same question. Which mistake is worse? Retiring a little too early or working a little too long? Because retire too early and you may run short on money. Work too long and you may run short on time. And that's a tough question. And before you answer it too quickly, let me tell you why my answer changed. Because 10 years ago, I would have answered very differently than I do today. Now, let's be honest about why most people keep working. I don't think it's greed. I don't think most people are trying to become rich. I think most people are looking for certainty. 1 more year of income, 1 more year of savings, 1 more year before taking the leap, 1 more year because the market feels uncertain, 1 more year because healthcare is expensive, 1 more year because retirement feels permanent. And honestly, that sounds pretty reasonable until 1 year becomes two, two becomes five, five becomes 10. And before you know it, you're still working even though you passed your original retirement goal years ago. I've seen it happen. Maybe you have too. In fact, something interesting happens when people finally reach their retirement number. Many of them they don't stop working. They just move the number. 2 million becomes two and a half. Two and a half becomes three. Not because their lifestyle changed, not because they suddenly need more money, because certainty feels good and letting go feels uncomfortable. And that's the trap. And I understand it because I almost fell into that trap myself. Because before the layoff, I would have probably kept working too. And here is why. A few years before I lost my job, I was diagnosed with leukemia. And that diagnosis completely changed the way I think about retirement. Not overnight, but slowly. Because when something happens to your health, you start looking at time differently. You realize that money matters, but time matters too. And once time is gone, you don't get that back. And I know that that's not the most comfortable thing to think about or talk about, but it's true. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed. And that diagnosis forced me to ask myself a question that I had never seriously considered before. Not, do I have enough money? But if I only had 5 really good years left, how would I spend them? Would I spend another one in meetings? Would I spend another one waiting for the perfect time? Would I spend another one chasing a level of certainty that may never come? And those questions hit differently when you've been reminded that life isn't unlimited. If you know what I mean, hit that like button. And maybe that's why I started seeing retirement differently. Because retirement stopped being only a money decision and it became a time decision too. And here's what I think a lot of retirement conversations miss today. The math is important, obviously. You need enough money, you need a plan, you need to understand your risks. But eventually, the question stops being about math and it starts becoming about trust. Trusting yourself, trusting your preparation, trusting the years of sacrifices that you've already made. Because I think there are people watching this video right now who already have enough, may not um, maybe not enough for a private jet, maybe not enough for a luxury lifestyle, but enough for the life they actually need. The problem isn't that they haven't prepared. The problem is they don't believe they've prepared enough. And those are two different things. So let me ask you something. Are you protecting your future or are you postponing your life? Because that's the real question. And deep down, I think some people already know their answer. I think one of the hardest things about retirement is that nobody gives you permission. Your employer doesn't, your friends don't, the news definitely doesn't. In fact, most of the messages that we hear tell us to keep accumulating, keep saving, keep preparing, keep working. And again, there is nothing wrong with that. Some people love their jobs. Some people need the income. Some people find purpose in their work. But for the people who are financially ready, the challenge often isn't money. The challenge is letting go because the market will never feel perfectly safe. The economy will never feel perfectly predictable. Healthcare will never be perfectly affordable. Life will always give you another reason to wait. The question is whether you're willing to keep trading time you can't get back for safety you may not actually need. You see, when I got laid off at 51 after 19 years with the same company, I didn't choose to stop working at that company or that job. The choice was made for me. And at first, there was some uncertainty, sure, because suddenly the paycheck was going to stop. The routine was gone. But looking back now, I think that layoff gave me something I probably would have never given myself: permission. Permission to stop waiting, permission to find out whether all those years of preparation were enough, permission to stop chasing perfect certainty. Because if that layoff hadn't happened, I honestly think I would have kept saying, one more year, Anthony, and then another, and then another, waiting for a perfect moment that was probably never going to arrive. And that's why the question from earlier still sticks with me. Which makes it worse? Retiring a little too early or working a little too long? My answer today is very different than it would have been before the cancer. Very different than it would have been before the layoff. And I'd love to hear yours. Have you ever known someone who worked longer than they needed to? Maybe it was a parent. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe it was you. Let me know in the comments because I think this is one of the most important retirement conversations that we can have. Not because it's about money, but because it's about time. And if you've ever struggled with the emotional side of leaving work, you're not alone. When I lost my job, I also lost a big part of my identity. For 19 years, I knew exactly who I was. Then, suddenly, I didn't. And I made an entire video about that experience and what it taught me. So click on the on screen video, and I'll see you over there.